Hi, my name is SEdwards, and I did my senior project on political participation and involvement. I first started thinking about my project when I entered governor's school, and I'd always wanted to do my project based on theater because I love theater and that's my passion. But as I started thinking about what I wanted to major in college, I was considering politics. So I thought it would be a nice way to step into the world of politics by basing my project, excuse me, my project off of political involvement. Sorry. For my research, my burning question was, how does political participation correlate with the inability of natural-born American citizens being able to pass the citizenship test, and whether or not the American citizenship test is relevant to immigrating into our country? I learned the quiet history of the citizenship test and that it was established back in the day to prevent non-English speaking people from becoming American citizens. And that surprised me because we view it mostly as a way to assist immigrants into American lifestyle. And I also learned that most of the information tested on these people is not relevant to being an American citizen, as 1/3 of American citizens fail to pass the citizenship test, which compromises of 6 questions, which compromises of 10 questions, and to pass you only need to answer 6 correctly. So I learned that this very shocking fact, and I also learned that the political participation rates do correlate with this, as the most politically involved people are upper-class white American citizens who have more advantage to learning, to having more education background, and they have more time to actually go out and be involved in politics. I also learned this firsthand as I experienced local politics in my internship in community service. For my internship, I started out by shadowing the president of the Nelson County Democratic Party, Marilyn Mars, and I worked in the Democratic caucus, shadowing her and trying to figure out the political process because I wasn't familiar with either parties and how they chose the people that they decide to represent in the general elections. So I worked with the sheriff in the sheriff caucus, and then I worked again with them in the primary. For the caucus, I was in the voting room and shadowing them. But for the primary, I was out handing out ballots to people. It was very interesting because I've only been living in Nelson for 4 years, and I didn't really know anybody, but it was fun to see how local politics work because everyone knows each other, and it was very nice to be involved in that. I was not allowed to cross the cones in front of the carriage house when I was working with the Democratic Party. I also worked at the carriage house for part of my community service as I was an officer of election for the presidential primary in the spring this year. So I was on the inside of the carriage house helping people figure out the voting process. I also worked for my community service by making posters that I posted around the school and trying to get seniors to register to vote, which I think was quite successful because some people said that I helped them. I saw many students come out to vote. But when I was working in the carriage house, I realized that the people who were voting did not actually represent the vast majority of citizens of Nelson. Going back and looking on the statistics, there are 10,000 registered voters in the county, but only 3,000 turned out to vote for the presidential primary, which I thought was very shocking and disturbing. Many of the people that came out to vote, they were retired citizens, which makes sense because they have the time to come out and vote and be involved in politics. So I learned that there is a need for a national voting day where people have the chance to come out to vote, which should be nationally recognized because this is an important part of being an American citizen. and is one of the ways that we can influence our country. For the other part of my community service, I worked within our school with our SEA. In the past years, the SEA has been very dysfunctional, and it has been mostly run by Mrs. Knight, who was my mentor for my community service. I worked by establishing a system based off of the student government at UVA, where there are elected officials of the SEA instead of how we used to have the SEA established, which was where first block classes would vote for 2 representatives of their class. But those people didn't really have the passion for student government, so they would never show up to the meetings. And previously, the SCA only had done a couple of fund drives and the homecoming, but from personal experience with my relationship with Mrs. Knight as my teacher, that stressed her out because she was the one doing all the work. But after this year, the significance of, these are the SCA members, but here's the significance of my community service. As you can see, in the past 2 years, there were very few SCA members to represent our school. I was involved in the SCA last year, but I would not consider myself an active member, as there was a large communication issue, which is what I tried to fix more this year, which is why we have had 14 active SCA members who are people who have attended the vast majority of meetings based on my attendance record. This year for the SCA, we worked with homecoming, which really eased Mrs. Knight, as she has told me. And we've also raised money for a local boy with leukemia. We've raised money for the people who were affected by the tornado, and we also raised money for the leukemia fund again. And this week we worked with establishing a Spirit Week. It hasn't really been that successful, I must admit, but it's more than we've been doing in the past, and I can see that the people who are attending the meetings are more involved and they desire to be there, which is really important to me. In the end, I think that I would have rather done I value all that I've learned and experienced through this project, but a lot of things that I encountered were frustrating to me, and I realized that I did not want to major in politics in a domestic sense. I do plan on doing more with politics, but not the same way that I've been this year. But I think I would rather have done my project on theater, because that is the one thing that I really love, and I feel like I would have enjoyed my project more. But either way, I feel like my project has influenced a lot and impacted my life. I plan on attending the University of Virginia for my undergraduate education, where I will be double majoring in global studies with a focus in environments and sustainability, and drama with a focus in playwriting. Thank you.
How did when you said that election or selection of the SC members, they would just in their blocks choose, that change? Did that process change?
Yes, instead of having, in the past, the teachers would give me email asking them to hold a mini election in their first block to choose SCA members to represent their class. And usually they would choose them, but those people would never attend the meetings. So this year I instead promoted the organization in the school and asked a lot of the juniors that I knew would want to be involved to come out to the meetings, and that really influenced the amount of people who showed up.
What kind of support did you get from the administration to change that in the SCA? And when I think of the SCA, I think of like a student governing organization. So is there, I mean, we used to hold elections for a president and the roles. You know, I mean, the SCA was really like the school board for the student body. Is there anything that your group does that's along those lines that works with the administration to either advocate for student needs or help govern the student body?
I talked to Mrs. Knight, and we were kind of doubting how it would work out in the long run, because I had originally wanted to hold more formal elections where the students would have to give speeches and have more competition with being in the SCA, but she told me that in the past that it ended up like not working as well for the people who wanted to join. So I decided that it would be better just to round up all the people that wanted to be there, and then we held in the organization we held an election. But in the future, I wrote out the plan that I would like to have for the establishment of the group, but it just requires more people to be involved in it, because right now we have like a president, a vice president, and such. But I also wanted to divide the group into teams where they would have more representatives of each class, and then a team where people would be more involved and find ways that we can make more of a difference in the school.
What about the other part of the question? Advocating for the students' needs, that's part of what?
Yes, we tried to talk more to students this year, because in the past it was more of like what's going on locally that we could raise money for. And so this year we like talked to people for homecoming. We got like lists of music and what they wanted to see at homecoming. And we've been advocating for more things. We tried to do more with that in the Spirit Week this week, but I think that this is just not a good time for the Spirit Week in our school. So there hasn't been a large excitement for that, but I feel like that'll influence next year's decisions with what they plan to do. Yes.
I'd like to know more about the research you conducted on the citizenship test, specifically what you found to help answer the question whether the citizenship test is truly relevant today to those to people who want to become naturalized American citizens, and if you believe that there is a better process for naturalization.
I believe that it is important for immigrants to be more immersed in American life, but I think that the citizenship test does not fulfill that need, because it is based off of discrimination, and most of the questions are not about current events. They're about like when was the Declaration of Independence written, which many Americans don't know. I personally believe that either the test should be reformed, or we should find a different way to allow immigrants into our society in a more welcoming manner. But this is also a touchy subject in modern politics, so it's just very controversial. But I personally believe that the citizenship test needs very strong reformation.
Do you believe this is related in any way to the other issue of low voter turnout that you identified, or do you see any common ground between many American citizens' inability to pass the test and the low voter turnout that you experience?
Yes, I found that many of the people who cannot pass the citizenship test, they are also not involved in politics. The people that can pass are more educated and are from a wealthier background, and there's an equal amount of inability between urban and rural areas, but they just fail different questions differently, which I thought was interesting. But both areas have different reasons for lower voter turnout and the inability to pass the test. Are there any more questions?